Hello, good evening, everyone. As we learn to, deal with the new normal, sorry for our, 10 minutes delay, but I am hoping we are live now and you all can see us. So, good evening and welcome again. I would like to tell you about this event today that you have, gracefully joined in. So, we start with telling you about what is She the People TV. She the People TV is India's biggest digital storytelling for women, dedicated to championing and promoting their journeys. They empower, engage, and elevate, connecting them into a network that inspires and grows each other's efforts. NETRI Foundation is a not-for-profit, not-partisan organization to amplify women's political participation and decision-making at all levels of representation and governance. Our initiatives attempt to bring data and policy into the daily lives of women through training and capacity building exercises and empower them to take up positions of leadership in the community and in politics. Since last year, we have built inroads into 4 districts of Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh and oriented 250 plus women to build their capacity for the Panchayat elections. Today, we welcome our very prestigious panel here to discuss women you hear is that Women Who Lead series is an advocacy initiative started by NETRI Foundation and She the People TV to bring to you conversations about women politicians and their journeys. Our first event today looks at the intersectionality between gender, politics, and technology. It is an honor to introduce our stellar panel and terrific panel today. And allow me to begin. Our first speaker today is Charu Pragya. She's a lawyer politician who is the first female head of a national legal cell of Bharatiya Janata Party. She is a national media panelist for BJP and runs free legal aid and centers for women across India, alongside organizing a public lecture series called India Dialogue that focuses on public policy issues. She is also a fellow of the Conrad and Renner School for Young Politicians and founding member of the India-Israel Young Leaders Forum. So we welcome you, Charu. Thank you for being with us today. Moving on, we would like to introduce Pratik Sinha, who is the co-founder and editor of Alt News, a fact-checking website founded in 2017. He is a former engineer who has worked with multiple technology companies and a member of Jan Sangharsh Manch, a civil liberties organization based in Ahmedabad. Sinha is also the co-author of India Misinformed, A True Story, a book on the various fake news spreading on social media, which was released in March 2019. Thank you so much, Pratik, for joining us today here. I would like to now introduce our third panelist, who is Neelam Pandey. She is a senior associate editor with The Print and covers politics and policy. Prior to joining The Print, Neelam worked for over 10 years with the Hindustan Times, where she covered several ministries, including human resource and development, culture, and tourism, Delhi politics, and policies. A Shivaning scholar, Neelam worked as a reporter with a pioneer before HT. She's completed her master's and bachelor's in English honors from Delhi University, post which she pursued MPhil in English literature, and she's currently pursuing her PhD. So thank you again for joining. Thank you so much, Neelam. We would like to introduce our fourth panelist today, Yasmin Kidwai. Welcome, Yasmin. Yasmin is an elected municipal councillor from Daryaganj, New Delhi, and a supporter of the Indian National Congress. She is an entrepreneur and an acclaimed filmmaker who has produced over 50 documentaries over a career of 12 years. One of her films, Parda Hai Parda, explored the relationships between women and the whale. So welcome, Ms. Kidwai. But Kidwai has also worked extensively with Helpage India under the Ministry of External Affairs on issues of social justice, such as women empowerment, rural and social development. We welcome you again. I hope your internet is much stable now and we'll be able to hear you and see you clearly.
I can hear
So
you.
thank you so much. Yeah, great. Now introducing our stellar and our terrific moderator for today, which is Tara Krishnaswamy. Tara is a software director at an MNC in Bangalore, where she leads Citizens Pressure Group, which is a global working to get more women into state assemblies and parliament. She is co-founder of Citizens for Bengaluru, a grassroots people's movement with landmark campaigns. She has worked extensively on Lokpal amendments and the Justice Verma Committee for rape law amendments, and also presented to multiple Rajya Sabha standing committees. She was co-convener of the Nirbhaya Fund Roundtable, Hyderabad, for the administration of the Nirbhaya Fund, which was instituted. She was also a special invitee to the 15th Finance Commission with ministers of several states. A TEDx speaker and an author of live mint, amongst others. She's an advisor to NETRI. I welcome you, Tara, to moderate the stellar panel. I am Kankshi Agrawal. I am the founder of the NETRI Foundation, and thank you for joining us today with She the People TV and NETRI Foundation's initiative, Women Who Lead series. And we are going to discuss who gets the limelight after all. Because this is, again, I will mention that it is at the intersection of policy, politics, gender, and most importantly, media today. So thank you, everybody, for joining. And over to you, Tara. What is happening? Hello, Tara, can you hear me? Hello? Tara, can you hear me? Hello? Tara, can you hear me? We have lost Tara, probably. But we would like to... okay. So we would like to begin with Charu Pragya, who is here today, joining us from Delhi. I would like to first know, Charu, from you, your journey into politics, from being a professional lawyer and then coming into the space of politics. How is your experience of being a politician, a young woman politician in the current scenario of the country? Charu, can you hear me? What is happening? Charu, can you hear me? Is somebody... Tara, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay. Okay, Pratik, you can hear me. Probably to catapult into the discussion. And as I said, it is becoming so difficult. And all those who are watching us, I'm so sorry for this because we're doing this thing with Be Live for the first time. But thank you so much, Pratik, for being responsive. So my first question to you. You are not somebody who covers politics, but as you say that, all things the death knell for fake propaganda. The question is very specifically to, as we see the rise of women politicians coming over to social media, to use that space effectively. That change has been from the mainstream media to social media. And right now, politics does happen a lot more on Twitter. So my first question to you is that how do you see women using this platform, but also how are they being targeted in a specific manner when it comes to fake news and trolls and propaganda?
Right. Thank you for having me on this panel. So, of course, in this day and age, if you're a politician, if you're any sort of a public representative, then your presence on social media is very, very important. And so, for example, parties like Bharatiya Janata Party, they were far, far ahead of in the game even before 2014, and you can clearly see, the advantages they have reaped, and this includes individual politicians. From what I know, individual politicians in the party were asked to create a social media, sort of have a social media profile, and not just have one. There was a mandate to have sort of a minimum number of followers and things like that, a minimum number of reach. And you can see multiple politicians like Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman, Ms. Smriti Irani, all of them having millions of followers on social media platforms, including Twitter, where a lot of politics happen. So, and on the flip side, if you look at Congress, they were clearly late in the game, with even Mr. Rahul Gandhi joining probably in 2015, 16, post the 2014 elections, and Ms. Priyanka Gandhi joining just last year. Clearly, there different parties are not sort of embracing social media in the same way, and the parties who are embracing it early and creating following have had a far larger impact in terms of reaching out to people. Now the question is, in that reaching out, there is, of course, personal messaging. So they use different Instagram profiles in a different way. For example, Smriti Irani may post some more personal pictures on her Instagram profile as opposed to her Twitter profile. Twitter is more political and things like that. And I think the same happens with other political leaders too. But in terms of propaganda and political messaging, I think Facebook and Twitter have been the mainstay. And that is where the targeting also happens. That is where I think the most common way of targeting women on social media is to attack them at a personal level. And so, for example, Shaila Rashid, who you would consider somebody who's new in politics, somebody who sort of was the vice president in JNU, and then joined a party which she quit eventually. And the sort of attacks that she has faced at a personal level, right from misinformation campaigns. For example, she raised money for this Kathua rape victim and Unnao rape victim. And then there was this concerted propaganda against her, stating that she has gobbled up all the money, things like that. And also people who are in the periphery of politics, journalists, for example, Rana she faces the most ugly attacks that you will ever see. Most recently, you could see what happened with Safura Zargar, where there were porn clips which were circulated targeting her. So there is a very specific kind of misinformation and propaganda that is used to target women politicians. And again, that is across the spectrum, across the ideological spectrum, irrespective of which party or ideology they belong to. The mode of attacking them remains uniform.
So, if you can hear me, Charu, you're able to hear me?
Now I can. Sorry
Yes.
about that, Tara.
Okay.
I had a little hitch with technology.
No, me too. So, Charu, you're a media panelist, and also you lead the legal wing of the party. In your experience of being called by media to be a panelist, does media, and I include TV and print media in this, do they kind of err towards certain topics, certain stereotypical topics? I notice, for example, if there are serious incidents of rape or molestation, there tend to be more women on the panels, right? Even women politicians on the panels than, if it's a discussion on taxation, for example, right? You hardly find women discussing tax policy. So, do you, in your experience as a sort of a advertised, registered panelist of the party, find that you get called more for certain kinds of topics than others?
I think you're very right about that. There's a lot of stereotyping that happens, and especially when you are a woman in a world that is considered a man's domain. So, politics is definitely a profession where men are considered to be more dominant, and even though the number of women in politics is increasing, it's still dismal. It's a very low number. And when we are on TV panels, it is observed that women-centric topics are what women are generally called to speak about, wherein I think it should be the other way around. Why should men not be raising their voice for women? because that's where the disparity starts beginning, because the men don't want to talk about women's issues, the women's talk about the women issues, and it just becomes some sort of a slugfest, and it's not taken as seriously. I think when very serious women centric issues come up, it's vital for men to speak up equally. And I think there is also a stereotyping that happens in what sort of knowledge a woman has gathered. So you're right, like if it's taxation or if it is a court case which has just been decided and some statements have to be made on constitutional law, the media channels also gravitate towards the male spokespersons because it's assumed they are going to know the topic much better than a woman. You don't get into the expertise of what the woman might have done before, what her education background might be, and that's really sad. And I'm going to use one activity that I've been involved in very recently, and I came to know that things are so deeply embedded in our minds that men don't want to talk about certain things. They think, oh, women are doing their activism, well done, all the best to them, what has this got to do with me? I'm going to use the example of sanitary napkins. So when we try and create awareness about things like menstruation, the men don't want to talk about it, and I tell them that the phobia and the stigma that is attached in the minds of a woman, it's because the men make them feel shy or abnormal because of a normal biological process their body goes through every month. So I think it's vital for women's issues for men to speak up as well. And if the media channels are not doing it already, the men on our panels need to be more proactive and say, I would like to speak about this topic. I've got a young daughter. My wife would be happy if I did this. I've got a sister. So it has to begin from there. We say he for she. This is where it comes into play. He has to stand up for she.
Thank you, Charu. I want to sort of follow up that question with Neelam. Neelam, you have been in both print media and now online media. And, like Charu said, there are certain issues classified as women's issues. Is that actually doing a disservice to women politicians? Because, for instance, neither is rape a women's issue. It's really a law and order and a social issue on the one hand. On the other hand, whether it's taxation, whether it's water, whether it's infrastructure, it's all our issues. It's not men's issue, right? But by classifying certain things incorrectly as women's issues, it seems like media gravitates towards men for all other issues, which is 95% of the problems. So if you look at the media coverage, not only, global media reports suggest that, barely 50% or 7%, actually single digit percentage of the news is about women politicians. Even where the news is about these issues, the reportage doesn't necessarily get quotes from women, right? Even then men are quoted on various topics, right? So what is your thinking around how media ends up shaping and framing this in that manner?
Well, you're absolutely right, Tara. We are to a certain but
I can't hear you well, Neelam. I don't know if others can hear you.
I can't hear Neelam, and I couldn't hear the other lady also.
Charu also? Okay.
Yeah, I could hear Prateek though.
I'm
Okay.
back.
And
I
you can
hear
hear
you
me.
again.
I can hear you very well, yes.
I couldn't hear Neelam. So while we wait for Neelam to come back, I'll switch to Yasmin. Yasmin, you're in a very unique position because you are in grassroots governance, right? And you are an elected councillor in Delhi, and you are the closest to people. And yet, if you look at media coverage of politicians in general and women politicians in particular, it tends to gravitate towards things that are as close to the parliament and assembly as possible. And grassroots politicians that are closest to the people's issues seem to get least amount of the limelight, right? What are your thoughts about it? Is that correct? I mean, even for local issues, like if there is a local problem, local health issue, now in the times of COVID, local water issue, media tends to go to an MLA rather than the local councillor, which causes two different problems. One is it's the wrong person to go to. Second, it sends a wrong signal to the people as if the MLA is responsible for your water supply as opposed to your councillor.
Well, the MLA is responsible for the water supply. But yes, you're right. It's rather unfortunate that the the municipal councillor in cities and or the panchayat in the rural areas are the ones who are closest to the people and to the people's problems. And it's rather unfortunate that not only the media does not look at it as such. If they were to do that and help empower the councillor, it would actually actually help empower people down the line, because you would be able to get a lot more done since you're closest to the issues and you can handle them there and then. So,
Is there a difference between male and female counselor coverage, you think?
well, thankfully there is a 50% reservation for women at the urban local bodies. So now you have an equal number of women representing
I mean, by the media,
no,
in
no, that
media.
I was coming to that. And so like with reservation, what has happened is that women have needed that leg up and that push up to come a little bit into the forefront, and that is definitely needed considering the kind of where we are coming from, and women have not been at the forefront. Similarly, the media has to make an effort to give a little bit of extra attention to female counselors, because if they are, a lot of them are first time counselors, whether and most parties sometimes do tend to change their councillors. The BJP has a tendency to do that in most municipal elections. I am also a first-time councillor, so it does take time for a person to get their feet. At that time, I think the same way that you provided reservation and this platform has been created, the media also, I do think, has to do a certain amount of, if not hand-holding, at least give an equal amount of coverage and uh, even through the women counselors highlight women's issues. See, I always feel that if you're talking of reservation, if you're a female representative, it is not necessary. It is not done for that. The seat has not been reserved. Reservation is not for the particular counselor or for an X number of women to be able to move forward in their life or for their empowerment journey. It also means that you by now are representing a certain section of society who were
Voters and
not
whose
getting,
grievances, yeah, whose
yes, who were
grievances haven't been heard, unheard
who were not,
voices. Yeah.
yes, who were not heard for a very long time. And even in, if you go on to an area, your the development issues, men will come, and they are the ones who are the deciding factors. They are the ones who will come and put forward the issues which they face. So I believe that when you have a female representative, it gives that much more chance for women to come forward and connect and put forward their issues. So similarly, if the media would play a positive and constructive role in highlighting those issues at the same time, I think it would go a long, long way.
Thank you, Yasmin. So back to Neelam, we were talking about, not only that the percentage of stories on women politicians, which is just 7% according to the Global Media Report, also in any given story where, your water and your roads are and education are as much women's issues. In fact, AAP recently won an election based on, these issues. Women are not quoted, in the reportage, right? You don't find quotes from female politicians and female voters for that matter. So, as someone who's been in both print and online, what is your thinking about that, and how do we change that mindset?
Yeah, well, as I was saying earlier, that I would like to first give one particular example and then I will delve into the question. Well, if you look at political parties themselves, well, how many of important positions are occupied by women? If you look at the general BJP, Congress, if I just ask you who are they, I of course know Saroj Pandey is the general Priyanka Gandhi was like one of the secretaries. I don't general public know. However, they must have heard of Ram Madhav, or they must have heard of Nata. They would know about her. So my particular question is: are political parties themselves playing important role for true women within their organization? However, I do feel looks at women politicians, they, they look at them from the point of women. They are not politics. See a lot of women. From there, they graduate to becoming counselors, MLAs, but at the same time, whenever we look about or when we think about doing stories about women candidates,
I've lost Neelam again. Is anyone else being able to hear her?
It was very patchy.
Okay, all right. So I'll come back to you, Pratik. As it is, the stories about women in media, substantive stories, are very few. But then when they do exist, especially in the 2019 elections, during election season, for example, and you must have analyzed a lot of news around that time, right? There was just a lot of references to women's bodies, attire, what they wear, and there is just a lot of body shaming, if you will, and a focus on how they look rather than what it is they bring to the table and offer the electorate, right? So, and a whole bunch of this could be fake as well, but in a sense it doesn't matter if it's fake or real. That's not the point of that's not the point of women in politics. So, what do you see, especially on social media, around how women are portrayed, and what can we do about it? What can women themselves do about it? Having analyzed all this, what are your insights into this?
Um, so there is body shaming, and there's beyond that too, in the sense that, so for example, you'll see pictures of politicians in their private capacity and in their public capacity. Politicians probably dress differently. Women probably dress differently in their private capacity, and probably when they are out on the ground, and there are these constant comparisons that look how they dress separately here and this, and that and that apparently is a sign of hypocrisy. So all those kind of things are there, but in my I frankly I haven't sort of studied more that. My main focus has been hate speech and misinformation on social media, and that is where I think that things get much more personal in terms of speaking about that this person has an affair, this woman has an affair with this person. Those are the kind of
Targeting
narratives
them.
that you see. Yes, where personal life is, I mean, besides misinformation, your personal life is sort of put on the platter to attack women, and I see that again and again happening on social media.
I've also noticed as a follow up that women tend to be boxed into their personal roles as well, not just how they look in personal life, but personal roles. For example, there was the famous Telegraph headline of MP Smriti Irani being called anti-national, right? But you never see, for instance, Mr. Amit Shah being called a grandpa. So it's very often that there was a tweet about Shailaja, the Minister for Health in Kerala, being a grandmother, right? But you never see those kinds of references, roles, personal role references for men in politics, right? So, Neelam, why do you think that this is the case, that women are not only targeted for how they look, but their personal lives are constantly brought into their professional sphere, whether or not they like it, it gets dragged in.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was talking about the appearances or the fact that who's having an affair with whom. These are the tools that are used to target women, especially on social media. Just a small example of Divya Spandana. She had posted a tweet about the Prime Minister, and I am not saying that whether the tweet is in good place or not, but my intention is there are many other politicians, male politicians, often make such derogatory remarks, but that never blown out of proportion. Whereas Divya Spandana's example was used as the entire Congress party. So my point, and Divya Spandana, who was a social media head, he was as someone who, film from the south. Whenever politicians also introduce her, they would definitely talk about that as concerned. Whenever anyone is asked, and I say tokenism or this having a main have someone's representation in the form of female spokesperson. At the same time, even to this, when we are talking about person names that come to our mind are Vipasha or Gaurav Vallabh or Amit Malviya. I mean, I wouldn't, even I myself would have to think wise before I come up with a female spokesperson. At the same time, if you look at was with the Congress, and when she made the shift from the Congress to Shiv Sena, it was actively when with the from Congress to the he was not told massively. So I also think that there is a difference of in terms of how women politicians are treated, and at the same time, you always whenever there is a budget in all the and the uh, that even the photographer will approach all the female personalities together and then give photographs of them.
I guess we lost Neelam. If Charu is there, I'd like to ask her a follow-up question. Are you there, Charu? Okay. So,
Yes, I am. I am.
oh,
I'm
okay,
back.
great, super. So, Charu, Neelam was, trying to tell us that there is a sort of a barrage of outrage that women face on social media. It seems women are the easiest target in terms of, people, not even their opponents, not even using the least degree of gray matter in order to counter the point, right? The easiest thing to do is to hit personally, or make an attack about how you look, or or something about your personal life. So it's the cheapest shot you can take, and yet that happens. So do you think, looking back at your own journey and entry into politics and becoming a media panelist and your own experience, do you think this discourages women? And how in your journey did you handle this or account for this? I'm not trying to say that women need to handle this. I think media needs to take some responsibility on the one hand, and of course those taking the cheap shots need to be held to account. But that said, those people that want to be in public life still need to learn to deal with it, right? Otherwise it can be an extremely traumatizing experience. So would you share your journey and any tips that you may have?
Dara, unfortunately, the concept of she's a woman, what would she know, has become so prevalent in the mindset of people in certain professions that it comes across. And I have not seen any male politician being body shamed. So, what happens with a woman is, oh, she looks too good, that's a problem. Oh, she doesn't look good enough, that's a problem. And it all adds up to things which have nothing to do with her merit. So I think it's just very easy to put down women when you have to attack them, because all you have to do is just hit below the belt. You have to just say certain things, and more often than not, she's going to back off, and you won an argument through unfair means. But that being said, I think women have stopped taking it lying down now. The way women have started calling out people who are shaming them has increased,
Yes.
and that's wonderful. Hats off to them. So what I usually do is, a couple of times you tend to ignore these cheap shots because you don't want to give it enough importance, you don't want to respond to it. I'll take the example of both television and social media. So on social media, some comments might go unnoticed if you don't respond to them, but the
Right.
minute you start responding to them,
Yes, they
of course
embolden.
the visibility becomes much higher. But sometimes the comments are so hard hitting and so
Yes,
unrequired that I think calling out is essential. But
correct.
the number of people who are supporting these calling outs now have largely increased, and trolling
You
of
think
women
you
is,
think women across party lines there is a non-partisan camaraderie? Have you noticed that at all? Are women at all banding together to say, "Hey, it doesn't matter, even though I completely disagree with her, you don't get to do this"? Do you see that at all happening, or we are
I
not yet there yet?
we are not exactly there, but I think we are working towards it, because in recent times I notice when something happens to a woman, there was a colleague from another party recently who was sent some obscene images on her social media accounts. So everyone from across the parties spoke about it, and everyone from across the parties came together to say no, this is not done, and she didn't even belong to the BJP. And the same thing I see has happened multiple times, but it doesn't happen always. And I
All the
think the
time.
reason for that is the ideological divide has become so great all of a sudden in the last couple of years. That the beauty
Yeah.
of dissent that Indian democracy enjoyed has now become a more like a constant never ending debate. and we are so fixated on our ideologies, we sometimes forget that you have to defend a person sometimes, even if you don't defend their ideology. So even if a person comes from some other thought process, but something wrong is happening with them, it's your duty to speak out for it. But I think if women just formed a sisterhood of sorts, we would be doing much, much, much better. We need to start working towards
Yeah,
that.
I don't see how we can stop this unless we look at it as another human being is being unfairly attacked, as opposed to looking at it in a partisan manner. Yasmin, on a completely different note, during your campaign, you ran the election campaign for your own election, not too long ago, right, in 2017, I think. How, and you yourself have been on the other side of the camera as a filmmaker as well. How was the media coverage during your election campaign, and from a quantity perspective, and also from the qualitative issues of what you brought to the table to your electorate and how that was covered?
Unfortunately, when the municipal elections happened, or there is not enough national coverage. Which, like, going back to the beginning of what you said, that there is not enough attention given to the municipality election. So what one saw is that the local channels of the bigger channels, the state-based channels, would be the ones covering the story. And also, I did feel that neither were there was any special focus given to women or to issues, and what who or profiles, and bringing that across to the electorate, that what is if there is a new person or there are four people in the fray, what is each one bringing to the table. I think which would have been very healthy. If the media, even if you just want to limit it to the local,
Yasmin? Okay, I guess we lost Yasmin. Neelam, coming back to you, why do you think we aren't doing, things like debates, especially with including women? A lot of the debates that I see on TV, and I don't mean TV panels, I mean election debates, right? And even on online media, there is no reason why you can't have, like, the print has a very strong online presence, but you rarely see debates, and especially women talking about.
Hi, can you see me?
Hello, Neelam, are you able to hear me? Are you able to hear me, Neelam? Okay, so I'll go to Pratik now. Pratik, what do you think is the end to this specific fake news targeting, that targeting of women? What is the end game here? I mean, there is no end to the number of people joining social media. There is no end to people indulging it. We don't see a Twitter or a Facebook take action. I myself have reported many handles that have that send abusive content. I don't see those people necessarily disappear, right? I may block them, but they don't disappear. So what is the end game? How do we manage this at all? Pratik, are you able to hear me? Charu, are you able to hear me?
I
Is
can
it on
hear
my
you.
end?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
No,
I can hear you
I
now.
think there is
Okay,
some
great.
sort of a tech issue.
Yeah. So let me ask you a different question then, while I still have you. You know, you how do we make sure that parties actually have more women in media as spokespeople, as panelists, speaking for the party on a variety of issues? One of the ways to combat this is just flood the market with women politicians, right? And you take a party like yours, like BJP. There were announcements that there are 3 crore women in the BJP. And yet, Vijay Rahidkar, the women's wing head at that point, Mahila wing head at that point, made the announcement. Mr. Amit Shah himself made the announcement. And yet, we see very few women panelists, especially on substantive issues. Is there a quota, or how do they decide that we will have X number of women panelists and Y number of male panelists? How does that happen?
So within the BJP, there is a quota. We happen to be one of the political parties which has a quota for office bearers at least, and we try and ensure that at least 1/3 of them are going to be women. But spokespersons are not office bearers per se. So this quota does not extend to spokespersons, but there is a very positive change I have seen very recently. I'm one of the newer media panelists for my party, one of the latest recruits, in fact, and. During the time when I was recruited, there were 8 of us who were listed out, and 5 of these happened to be women. And I can't be more proud of that than I am right now, because there
But
are,
yet we don't see you
yeah.
women
I was just
necessarily on certain
I
issues.
was,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I was just coming to that. Usually, what happens is that many a times women are adjusted in politics to fill up certain quotas. Many a times women are sent on issues which are considered trivial. Many a times the entire system is so dominated by men that women don't have a chance to choose what they would like to speak about. So, as you rightly said, if there is a rape case, the party, and not just my party, any party, and including the news channels, they're going to start looking for a woman spokesperson. In fact, the calls from the media channels to parties will be like, so and so is the issue, and can we get a woman, please? So it does not strike them to get a man on board. And the reason for this is that I think men are not comfortable speaking about women's issues. Men need to be more comfortable speaking about women's issues, and they grab up the more serious issues right in the beginning, so not much of it is left out. Because when you look at the number of women, even in parliament today, we say this is the highest number of women parliamentarians India has ever had, but it's still a
It's
very dismal
minuscule.
number.
It's
It's
minuscule. Yeah,
14.
yeah.
It's 14%.
Percent.
And you would think this is
Yeah.
true for India, but if I were to give you quotations of numbers from other countries, even developed countries like Germany, like Russia, like Brazil, for example, have numbers which are worse than ours. 14% sounds terrible, but there are developed countries with percentages which are way lower than even ours. So I think this happens because the labeling of women happens at many different levels. But when you look at a man, you just see a politician and you don't look beyond that. For a woman, you're going to look at her in 20 different ways. Is she a mother? Does she have a commitment at home? Is this one married or unmarried? So a whole lot of those things come into play. Also, the main responsibility of homemaking, taking care of your children, falls upon the women. And that's why when women graduate from colleges, more than 50%, 57% in fact of college graduates in India are women.
Fall out of
57.
the, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but
But they
when
fall
you
out of the
reach
job
but you
market
reach
and
the
yeah.
workforce, it's not even 20%. So where do all these
Correct.
women
Yeah.
disappear? They just
Yeah.
disappear, and it's the same in politics. So you have to start the process of empowering them from the grassroots level itself. Men have to be made comfortable talking about women. I think there is no way around this. We can talk about reservation, but the argument around this also becomes that, oh, she might be a rubber stamp. Even if she has a position, do I really need to consult her? Do I really need to take her opinion into account? With the newer generation of politicians, this is changing. With the newer generation of spokespersons also, this is changing. So we have to make sure this wheel of change continues to roll.
Pratik, thank you, Charu. Pratik, I was trying to ask if, net, do you think social media hurts women or helps women? Do you actually see that women politicians or women in, even women talking about politics, they may be women in media themselves or just political commentators, if you will. Net, is social media actually increasing their visibility, helping them grow their stature and image? Or with all the targeting and with the barrage of harassment they face online, is it actually a net negative for them? As you analyze the fake news, what do you see?
So I would like to briefly comment on the last question before I think you couldn't hear me. I tried responding. As to whether this is going to end, the misinformation and especially targeting women, whether it's going to
And
end.
what the end game
Not
could
the
be?
fake
Yeah.
news. So I don't see it ending. I don't see, and this is the case with all different issues which are to do with social media platforms. That is, the platforms in general have been very lax in dealing with these issues. For example, even if you take the case of misinformation, you don't even have a place to report misinformation on Twitter. in 2020. We are in 2020 where misinformation is now a globally recognized issue, and we still don't have a way to report misinformation on social media, on Twitter, on Facebook, you do. In terms of abusive, in terms of abusive,
Content.
we have seen repeatedly how how so many people complain about this abuse being reported and it is not taken down. I want to take a specific example which happened very recently of Safura Zargar. There was this one Facebook group where there were men commenting, and we put that in the story that we did. There was a porn clip that was circulated. The porn clip was of probably a Latina actress who's US based, and that was circulated, claiming that here is Safura Zargar, and here is the propaganda was that because it was found out that she was pregnant, the propaganda was that she became pregnant while the protests in Delhi were happening, the protests against CNRC and
Anti-CAs.
Yeah, and what was sickening to see is that there were men after men. So because you can't post porn content on Facebook, they were like, whoever wants access to this, DM us or send us your phone number. And you would see so many men, lining up in comments, ki, mujhe bhejo, mujhe bhejo, mujhe bhejo. And it was,
oh my God.
And it was just line after line. And that was extremely shocking to see. But that group still exists. I mean, I don't see how that group should not be taken down, where this is the sort of conversation that is happening. So, at least as far as the end game is concerned, I don't see this ending because
Pratik, I think we lost
there
you
is
again.
a certain willing to keep up with their own responsibilities.
Right.
So that is one thing. What was your second question? I forgot.
My question is, net, do you think social media is a positive for women or negative? Because if you weigh the fact that, at least given that they don't get enough media attention on substantive issues with, mass media and digital media, social media allows them a platform to comment on things. If I look at, Charu's Twitter handle or Yasmin's Twitter handle, Yasmin comments on a variety of political happenings in the country. I don't see her being asked for quotations on those issues when she's very well capable of commenting on them, right? So social media, in a sense, gives that avenue for women to express themselves as credible politicians. But on the other hand, they get so unfairly targeted that the harassment and trauma is tremendous, right? So what is your net analysis from analyzing all this? Is it actually a net positive for women or a net negative for women?
In my opinion, it's a net positive. I mean, see, this is the unfortunate part of being on social media, that, and I'm not saying that this is how we should be. I'm not saying that abuse or personal attack should be normalized.
Continue.
I'm not even remotely suggesting that, but at least in the present political scenario in India, which is so highly polarized and things like that, the attacks are there all the time, and somehow. We have to sort of, and this is, of course, media professionals also face this similar kind of attacks. So I don't think there is any way out of that. But besides that, I think social media has also given a platform for multiple people. Yes, there is. I'm not saying that people talk about social media from the point of view of democratization of voices. I think it is still a very elitist platform. Your economic means largely dictate how many following you have. I mean, if you look at the data, and if you look at, let's say, somebody who has 10,000 followers and somebody who has 100 followers, the people who have more than 10,000 followers, I think if you do an economic review, I'm sure those who have more than 10,000 followers also are of a certain economic background. So I don't think that there is democratization in that way, even though we may keep saying it. But
pretend that it's that way.
Yeah, we may pretend that it is that way, but I think it is net positive, because at least women of certain economic background are able to express their opinions, whereas they may not have gotten that space at all. And we have seen certain male individuals, whether in politics, I mean, for example, if you look at the Me Too movement, and I don't think that would have happened in absence of social media. So there are
Absolutely.
So there are multiple things. With everything, there are pros and cons, but I think the pros at the point outweigh the cons.
Absolutely. In fact, if there was no social media, it would be very hard for someone like me who's interested and pursues this domain even to know what Charu does or Yasmin does. It is because of their social media presence that I am able to see what they do and how good they are at what they do and how they handle these things. The sad part, I don't know if the viewers know this or the panelists know this, Wikipedia pages for most women politicians are missing, other than very, very, very few women politicians. Even some iconic politicians of our past, you don't have Wikipedia pages on them, which means you don't have any information of who they are and what they bring to the table, what they brought to the table, the body of their work is completely missing, right? For instance, if you want to look at how many women were there in the Constituent Assembly and what did they do, that information is, you can Google it, but there aren't Wikipedia entries for even the women who helped create the constitution, right? So it's kind of, that's sad. Which brings me to Yasmin, your grandmother, for instance, was an iconic politician in Delhi, Tajdar Babar, right? She's a multi-time MLA, and in your opinion, how has the media portrayal of women in politics? You must have seen how your grandmother was portrayed in the media or her interactions with media through, and your parents' generation have been involved in politics as well, both men and women. So you've seen both in the past how media portrayed women, and today how women are portrayed in media. And you've also seen men being portrayed in media and women being portrayed in media, all other things being equal, even within your own family where your economic access is equal. You may be within the same party and you may all be elected representatives, and yet do you see a delta, and what did you see and what do you see?
So can I also complete the thing that I was speaking about earlier before we got disconnected?
Sure, please do.
Yeah. So I was, you had asked me what was the kind of, portrayal of which happened in the elections, which I had contested in the municipal elections.
Campaign,
and I was saying
yeah.
that in the campaign, and I was telling you that even at that point of time, though the focus was not on national television at all, the national channels did not cover municipal elections at all, and there was not much interest even in social media. The local channels did cover to a certain extent, but they were not like they were profiling. Forget women; they were not even profiling municipal councillors. And when there is a new entry of women, the media can support that to a large extent. Now, coming to the question of my grandmother, see, with all due respect, the media was not that powering at that point of time when she entered, and she had her own challenges when she entered politics. So she was a Kashmiri woman in a burqa, which she gave up as soon as she entered politics, and then from there, right from the grassroots, she went step by step, and with no background or any support, she went on to become the head of the Delhi Pradesh Congress, and was a multiple time MLA. So they face their own set of challenges. At this point, I feel that the media presence over the past 10 years, last 5 years, 2 years, from media then to social media, now there is this huge, the media kind of engulfs us and sets the trend. And
that's too much of an agenda, right? There is
so
too much of an agenda set by media.
so when television media kind of broke out about 20 years back, you saw that it really created a lot of opportunities for women. There's so many women, whether as anchors, reporters, camera people, women, got an opportunity to come into the mass media arena. I was also one of them at that point of time, and it should have ideally. While it created a space for these women, I don't think women issues still got center stage, and that is what is unfortunately happening even now with social media. While it's creating a platform and gives an opportunity for a lot of women, including me, to come and voice our opinions, and there is a net positive there, but it hasn't created either a sisterhood of women, like Charu was saying earlier. It hasn't done. I wish it had done that. You have your own a kind of
but the future is ahead of us.
Yes,
the future is ahead of us, Yasmin, and we have two powerful female politicians right here. Get started.
Inshallah. But so there are challenges which we have. There is a net positive, and I really wish more women were able to come up, and it is also up to us like, women who are, like, Pratik was saying, there's a certain kind of woman who is on social media. So, like, I believe in politically, I have to represent the women who are my constituents. Similarly, perhaps we can make a difference and put out more women's issues, which a sisterhood can then kind of, push forward. While look at the negative, let's see how positively we can make a difference to everything.
Thanks, Yasmin. Charu, there are a lot of women who, from the entertainment industry as well, in politics, right? Because of the face recall value and the name recall value, parties tend to also provide sort of an opportunity for them to enter politics. And it's particularly unfortunate the way the women from the entertainment industry are portrayed in politics, are portrayed in media, because there is somewhat of a looking down upon them as if it's a lesser profession, when it's a perfectly legal profession as anything else to pursue, and you're perfectly welcome to enter politics as from any other profession, be it a lawyer, be you a documentary filmmaker, or a techie like me, right? But somehow you and I and Yasmin may get more respect simply by virtue of the fact that we are not from the entertainment industry, as opposed to a female actor entering politics. In your view and what you've seen, as a media panelist from the Bharatiya Janata Party, do you feel like actors, even in your own party, right, they are both sort of viewed as infra dig, both by within the party, and that also seeps into media, and media also sort of gives them a certain lens, if you will?
It's very unfortunate, Tara, that something like this happens, because there is an entire spectrum of men who believe women should just be seen and not be heard. And that is where the danger starts, because it's all right for.
Charu, you know the answer to that, right? The only way to fix that is for us to be heard
Yeah,
even more
absolutely.
loudly.
Absolutely. And because we were discussing followers on Twitter and social media as well, when I look at my own demographics on Twitter, if I were to get into Twitter analytics and I take a look at that, would you believe 96% of my followers on Twitter are men?
Young men
96%.
especially. Yeah,
And
yeah.
4% of them are women. And that's a very, very low number. So when we say we are trying to achieve equality, and India has a very in-depth penetration of smartphones and of the internet, how much of this internet is available to women? How much of this internet is available to women who live in rural areas, who are young students in tier 2, tier 3 cities? Let me tell you, that number is very, very low, and that's one of the
Yeah, in
reasons
fact,
why
the
women's voice is
smartphone,
not amplified on social
correct, the
media.
smartphone penetration itself
Yeah,
is only
and
35%, and less than half is that women. So hardly 10% of women have smartphones.
exactly. And when I work in rural areas in India, and especially in Uttar Pradesh, I meet young girls and I tell them, wow, you said that so well. Why don't you put that on your social media account? And this girl will more often than not tell me, Didi, मेरा social media पे account है ही नहीं. My parents told me, आप Facebook पर account मत खोलिए. Twitter तो खैर, it's like doesn't really reach
Unheard
the
of.
grassroots.
Yeah,
Yeah, it doesn't.
yeah,
But
yeah.
so many parents are also making sure that girls are not visible on social media till they reach a certain age or till they are married, so on and so forth. So,
Because of abuse? Because of abuse.
maybe it is because of abuse, maybe it is because so many
They're
times
conservative.
pictures are picked up, they might
That's
be
what I mean.
mocked,
Yeah,
they might be
yeah,
misused.
yeah.
Also, nothing stops commenting under a picture, like Pratik just mentioned. Even if there is no legitimate way to post something, all this starts happening. And I'm again going to quote a personal example. There was a webinar that I was involved with right in the beginning of the lockdown. So, how in the beginning there were so many webinars and we were all learning the ropes. I had a diplomat who was on this webinar with me. And she said, no, no, I want to post the link openly. I want a lot of people to participate. Let me post the link openly. And when she did, the chat box is always open, the message box is always open. Random people who were supposed to have shown her culture that India is supposed to be all about showed her an entirely different side. And it is really, really very shameful when things like this happen. But I deviated, but coming back to the topic, the important thing is to increase the voice of women on social media, on media. Maybe in the media it's not possible right now, but can we not write more articles? Can we not make little clips and post it on our social media? It's all right to tell people that you don't have to be made up a certain way to come and face the public. A man will not think 20 times about physical appearance. Why is a woman programmed to think like that? And why must she dress or behave like a man to be taken a little more seriously? So, this Western notion of being a feminist has seeped into Indian culture, which doesn't hold true for India. You don't have to be, a woman who's got short hair, always wearing trousers, never using any makeup, to be taken more seriously. And I think that strictness, that straight lines that we have put women into, needs to change, so that there is a equal acceptance of them by the others on social media, and their opinion is also taken and shared just as frequently as a man's opinion.
Thank you. Pratik, in your analysis, how can women sort of protect themselves from being objects of, fake news, morphed pictures, abuse? Are there tips and tricks that you've seen, which applies to men equally, but since women are disproportionate targets of abuse, are there things people who have accounts, basically, and especially women, can do about this? What would you suggest?
I don't think there's a solution. I mean, in the sense, if somebody goes ahead and morphs your pictures, then what are you going to do? And that is happening at a political level too. For example, just now there's a picture of Mr. Modi sort of bowing before the Chinese president, and that's a morph picture. So, and there are tons of morph pictures of Rahul Gandhi. So I don't think there is any solution to that kind of misinformation at this point of time. That is that is not a gender specific. I mean, yes, there are gender specific.
Women are much more
yes.
subject to it. Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
Yes, but
do other countries have sort of ombudsmen or neutral bodies to which you can complain, and but be it cybercrime, even our cybercrime, I'm not sure how effective our police cybercrime divisions are. I've personally not had experience. Have you had experience with using cybercrime on some of these falsified videos and images, and is there prompt action?
I haven't personally. I haven't, but I know many folks who have complained. For example, certain folks go and open nowadays you can file an online police complaint. But what I've found all the time is that is just a way for people. People get the satisfaction that they have filed a police complaint, but it almost never converts into an FIR. So
I see.
Only if there is actual, political pressure, then would a online complaint convert into an FIR. But otherwise, it would never convert into an FIR. And who has the time to? I mean, there's so much abuse. How many cyber complaints are you gonna file? So even if people do file these cyber complaints, I don't think things happen. I think another problem is even bodies which are, so for example, National Commission of Women, etc. They are also being unfortunately politicized, and which I think is detrimental. That they are getting a political character, so they are entertaining more of political complaints from one side, sort of, as opposed to complaints from another side. And I think that is also an issue. But I think what probably is need of the hour is for these women bodies like National Commission of Women to get more power, and for them to sort of make these representations at multiple levels. I mean, there has to be activism in that area, that you make a representation to, let's say, Facebook or Twitters of the world and say that, look, these are the issues. I don't think there is...
That's a very concrete suggestion, that there is an official, formal representation from a formally recognized body, that in general, these acts are accelerating at an uncontrolled pace against women, and that some regulation needs to be brought in.
Another thing that I believe is very effective is documentation. That is a database of generally, see, these are so for example, let's say accounts which typically abuse you, right? There's so many anonymous accounts which come ahead and abuse, and they sometimes have up to 50,000, 100,000 followers. So database of these accounts that look, this is the abuse, the account is still active. This is the abuse. This is this. I mean, there has to be a systematic approach to this issue where you show the data and you ask these bodies as to, look, what have you done? Why are these accounts active? At least, if that sort of start is made, and at least you make sure that, let's say, a few 100 accounts are 100 major accounts which sort of indulge in this systematic targeting. If they are gone off social media, then the other accounts which come, if there's a history which is said, then I think some change can be made. But I believe that there is a lot more scope for activism. Another thing that I would add is that, for example, so there are a lot of these Dalit organizations who are, because there has been an underrepresentation of Dalit issues also in media, so they have created their own platforms like Veliwada.
Yeah, countercurrents. Yeah, countercurrents.
Yes. So I think there is also space for that, where, I mean, yes, for example, there is SheThePeople, but I think there is much more that can be done in terms of, so for example, opinions. Yes, let's say Indian Express or Times of India is not giving a woman space for an opinion on, let's say, the present India-China protest. But why isn't there a opinion platform where women commentators are coming and putting forth their opinion? So I think there is scope to do more in these areas.
In fact, that was what I was trying to ask Neelam. I think, unfortunately, we are not able to, have her connection. But I was trying to figure out whether debate as a sort of method itself is not very popular in India. And I'm not talking about TV debates. That's a misnomer. I'm talking about actual deliberative, conversations that happen in electoral politics and in politics in general in many other countries, which is a very serious form of media. And women, I think, are ideally suited to that because you don't need to lose your cool, you don't need to shout down each other, you don't need to vie for space in that 2 minutes that you get the spotlight as a media panelist, but you can actually have a longer conversation about issues. But I want to go back to Yasmin here. Yasmin, Muslim women in particular have been portrayed a certain way in Indian media over the generations. Also because, if you look at the education statistics, if you look at the economic statistics, Muslim women are underrepresented, right? They are far less educated as a category. They're far less economically dependent as a category. You see far less of them in independent positions. Now that is even more as a challenge as a Muslim female politician. And I've heard you say in an interview that it's therefore all the more important for educated Muslim women to come out and join politics so that, you can make the changes necessary, you can get the voices heard. So how do you think media can in particular highlight, just like, Pratik talked about SCSTs being an underrepresented category and women in general are an underrepresented category, women politicians in media, Muslim women politicians in media, even more, marginalized category. How do you think media portrays them and how do you think, and especially in the recent past, you have had so many protests, so many, vocal participation of Muslim women. If that is not politics, what is, right? Shaheen Bagh has been led by so many protests have been led by women, and women have been very vocal, Muslim women. So how do you see this Muslim women being portrayed by the media, and how do you think things can improve, so that we get a better and more accurate picture of the spectrum of women there are?
See, Narendra, what I feel is what is true of Muslim women is also on a larger sense true of the entire Muslim community. The community has been marginalized, and that is the fact of the matter. Whether economically or in terms of education, they are coming from in a slightly lesser place. So, in the same sense, so you tend to bracket groups and you tend to box
Yes,
people into these groups.
stereotype them. Yeah,
So you stereotype. So it's not just true of women politicians. I remember when I was in college, a lot of people would look at me, and I was studying in Hindu college, and they would say that, oh, you don't look like a Muslim woman. And as I slowly and step by step, I didn't know what to say to it. I'm sure they meant it as a compliment. It didn't seem like a compliment to me. So as I found my voice by and by, I remember at one point I turned around and I said to somebody, yes, I forgot my horns at home. like, so what is it that the media or at films, a stereotypical
I'm
portrayal of,
losing you, Yasmin.
whether it's a Christian man or a Muslim woman. Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, so there's this stereotypical portrayal, which has always happened, whether it's in the Hindi film industry or then thereafter in the media. The media, like I said, I wish that, when the media revolution came up, would have been more empowering and more positive for women. So yes, so all groups, and that includes Muslim women in particular, of course, and particularly Muslim women. Then you need that extra push, and you need to have a wide variety of stories coming out, so that these
That's what I meant. How do
stereotypical,
you represent the spectrum of
yes, and then
issues,
also,
right? The
yeah,
issues are not only about religion. Yeah.
they're not. So when somebody says to me, "Oh, you don't look like a Muslim woman," what does that mean? I am a Muslim. You understand? So that means there is somebody like me, and there is somebody like which you understand as your image of
Stereotype.
a Muslim woman. And I genuinely believe that if the more the more stories and the more you embrace the diversity in every aspect that we have within our groups, within the larger system, and you see and hear more stories and you embrace that, that would really help women, of course, and Muslim women also
Yes,
in particular. Now,
no doubt.
I come from a family like you mentioned about my grandmother, and that's my maternal grandmother. On the other side, I have my paternal aunt, who Mohsina Kidwai, who was a very strong female figure. She was a union cabinet minister for many years. So my images growing up, I thought all women worked. I thought all women were like that. I thought all women were outspoken. So it was also the images that I was, I saw when I was fed as
Yeah.
a child. I grew up with that. So similarly, if those kind of images increase more, and platforms where we are on right now, like Pratik was also saying, find that the mainstream is not covering. Why don't we create more such platforms? The She People TV is an excellent platform, more like that, and have
Yeah,
more
we need
interactions.
100 more SheThePeople TVs. Yeah, yeah.
I know, and She the People can also, they can also do a lot more,
Of
and
different formats. Yeah, yeah.
on digital format. So you see and hear. I mean, I'm meeting all of you for the first time, so it's so like Charu was saying in the beginning, like look, let's leave the ideological thing and support each other, the sisterhood. So now this is the first time I'm meeting somebody, and
Right.
or somebody like you. So it is. So the more there is exposure and there's the more awareness we are able to create, the more impact we'll be able to have, I feel.
So, Charu, do you think women need to be more assertive in promoting themselves? Within the party, do you see other women? I see that you are very assertive, right? But did you have to vie against men for attention and bring out certain specific qualities? This is more like a mentorship advice for other women, especially younger women who are aspiring. And that is one very positive thing I see. I see lots and lots of young women aspiring to get into politics, which I see is a very positive sign.
Yeah.
But they lack enough role models because there are fewer and fewer the further up you go, right? There are far fewer, and not everyone like yourselves are engaged in these public conversations to tell them this. And sometimes women come into politics by accident and happenstance, and you don't have the advice to give as well, right? I just landed up here, but you can't take my path. So it's a very strange path to take in. So really, two questions. One is, do you see that women in your party and in general need to be much more assertive to vie for certain positions against men and get it? And women are not being as assertive. They need to do more of that. And what is your advice for young people, young women trying to enter politics, for how to be seen, right? How not to be typecast, but how to be even seen and recognized so that you get a role for yourself?
The first thing I want to say is I think I faced a similar struggle when I was a lawyer as well, because as a practicing lawyer, as a litigator, even that is considered to be a man's world. So when you want to be a litigating lawyer in India, there is a little roadblock after a certain level, because it's assumed that you're not going to make it as successful as a lawyer as a man would. And it's true, because when you start counting the number of senior advocates who are women in India, I think
The
you'll stop your count
judiciary,
at two or three. So
yeah, the
it's
judiciary I
the
think is
same.
worse
It's the same.
than the politics, right? The judiciary
It's
is way worse. So that's a different debate altogether.
But Dara, the numbers are not very different whichever profession you belong to, unless you want to be a teacher or a gynecologist. And when I look at the numbers, I think when you see successful engineers, when you look at successful architects, successful lawyers, successful surgeons who are women, I'm not talking of just gynacs. When you look at the field of surgery, same for politics, it's a similar number. So the struggle has to be for all professions, all women together, of course, because politics happens to be a very public job. You're under scrutiny all the time. It gets a little more tougher. I think the first thing women have to do is find a cause. If you want to be successful as a politician today, you need to have a cause. Please understand that politics of India is changing. Now, politics are going to be socio politics and not just the politics of protests and demonstrations. When you have a cause, when you have built up knowledge about your cause, when you have worked around that one cause, you are going to be taken seriously. Maybe what I'm saying right now is not very rosy, but this is the practical truth. When you have domain expertise, you're always taken more seriously. So my advice to young women: find a cause, stick to it, try and achieve that stacking effect. So when you continue doing one thing day after day after day, you'll be recognized for it. The other thing that I want to mention is that maybe you don't have so many avenues to be visible in a traditional way, but as I mentioned earlier, try and put your opinion out there. Use social media, write blogs, try and find a newspaper which is willing to print a little piece that you have written. All this comes together and it helps, because when
It
someone picks up.
showcases your mind and your capability.
Absolutely. And I believe in this very firmly. Men might not agree with me. A woman needs to be twice as good as a man today. So make sure you become twice as good as everyone else around you, and make sure that is visible. Because when you are not going to ask for what you deserve, there are not going to be many people who will give it to you on a platter. Competition exists everywhere.
Great. So we have Neelam back. Thank you, Charu. So Neelam, would you like to complete the thoughts that you were trying to, talk about last time?
Yes. Just two things I know. The chain of thought seems to have broken. But two things I really want to highlight is that, when remarkable difference between the way women politicians print medium, the broadcast, as well as the new digital media. If you look at the broadcast or the TV coverage of women politician, I will give one example. In 2014, over 6 five prime time news channels were taken up, and 10 politicians who were covered. Out of those 10, only 3 were women politicians. And we know that those 3 women politicians were Sonia Gandhi, Priyanka Gandhi, and Mamata Banerjee. But at the same time, even these 3 politicians, they managed to grab only around 5.14% of time that was allocated. So what about those women politicians who are in fact active politicians? Because in 2014, Priyanka Gandhi Vadra was not even actively involved in politics.
Yeah,
She has
yeah,
just
yeah. She was campaigning here and there occasionally, and
become
that's
the
it.
general secretary of Congress. Obsession. Yes, yes, but at the same time, I'm sure there must have been many more active politicians. I mean, Yasmin is there, she's a counselor, she has been working, but is she getting that same kind of, let's say, the other names are? At the same time, I also feel that broadcast TV, broadcast medium has one disadvantage where uh, it feeds narratives which are more recognized. So ultimately, it's all right giving examples of
Neelam, may I make a suggestion? If you turn off your
Dipti
video and just
Malviya
use your
or
audio, we may be able to
Sambit
hear you.
Patra. They have become household.
I'm not sure your bandwidth is allowing for both video and audio. If it's possible to just use your audio, we'd love to hear from you. Not able to hear her at all.
No.
Ratik or Charu, you're able to hear her? Not at all.
Yeah, no, I can't hear her.
Okay. Yeah. Um, Pratik, let me come back to you. What do you think is the way forward for India and how we handle fake news in addition to creating bodies that can handle them and creating complaint cells and national commission for women. Um, what do we do about the fact that on a daily basis there is a barrage of this? And do you see this fake news happen and regional social media, right? Do you see on Twitter, for example, that regional social media is as sort of vitiated as the English social media and the kind of abuse that it perpetrates, or do you only see this with the with the English? And if so, what do we do about that?
I see it with both kinds of media. Am I audible? Am I audible?
To me, you are.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I see it with both kinds of media.
Yeah.
I forgot my train of thought. What was
Yes, you are.
Yeah, what was the
Yes.
question again? Quickly.
I was asking if regional media is as sort of ugly as the English media in terms of the kind of on social media, I mean, right? Regional media, regional use of social media, and the regional languages. Do you see as much abuse and fake news and all of that spreading as much as with English?
Yes, yes. There is as much abuse and misinformation on social media in all languages. In fact, now there is a deliberate attempt. So I see, for example, one meme created in one language. Let's say if it has some kind of misinformation, it is translated in multiple languages and put out. So there is a deliberate attempt in front for political parties that might be propaganda, which is going out in multiple languages. But I see that happening. And as far as solutions is concerned, and because you also raise the issue of morphed pictures, I mean, even if you ask the simple question, how do you do morphing using tools like Photoshop, etc. Now, if you go to rural India and if you ask the question, do you know what Photoshop is? What percentage do you think? What percentage of people do you think will know what Photoshop as a software is? And so that is where one of your answers that unless you create awareness around this issue, unless you create the awareness that a photo can actually be morphed, because we have grown up with this idiom that what you see is what you believe, as right. So and
image is reality and perception is reality.
Yes.
Yeah.
And especially now that we are soon going into the realm of deep fake and things like that, where we are not only talking about more images, we are talking about videos which look absolutely real, while not being real. So I think the foremost thing that we need to do, and this, if you look at all the child kidnapping rumors that happened, which led to all the mob lynching, I think the foremost thing that we need to do is educate people at a huge level in terms of this issue of misinformation being there. At least the first thing that they need to be made aware is what sort of a landmine social media can be very often, that there are these mock pictures. Don't believe what you see. We have to change that thing. Instead of saying believe what you see, we have to change that to don't believe what you see. There will be an information chaos and we cannot sort of escape that, but still there is a huge need for large scale awareness programs. And even then you'll see how because the percentage of women getting educated is far less as percentage of men getting educated. Again, that issue will still be there. That is, women not being told how to deal with social media, how to deal with things that come on WhatsApp, what to believe, what not to believe, how to figure out what are the origins of an image, how to figure out what are the origins of a video.
Pratik, do you think that this situation is any different abroad? Do they have in certain more developed countries where social media is more prevalent, Twitter penetration is more? Do you believe that they've developed other ways to combat fake news and deep fakes and morphing of pictures and in general what you see is what is true kind of a thing. Are there best practices from other places that India should be borrowing?
Definitely. And no, so they have not, you cannot combat morphing of images. See, what is morphing of image? You take a software and you morph it. Nobody can stop anybody from doing that, right? But what other countries are doing, especially Scandinavian countries, is, and even UK, they are coming up with courses which are taught at school level, mid school, and things like that, where people are being taught how to deal with how to deal with information in general. We are being bombarded with information from all sides. Growing up, I'm 38, and growing up, there was only limited amount of information that we used to consume, let's say in our 20s, and now look at the amount of information that we as individuals have to process on a day-to-day basis, and in that we have to figure out what is authentic and what is not authentic. So that is a skill that definitely all of us need. And I think there are educational institutes, and in a very organized manner, they're doing that in certain European countries. I'll give you one example. There was this rumor of, this is Indian example, there was this rumor of vaccination causing impotency. And this was circulated in multiple places. I know it had an impact in Gujarat and in Kerala. In Gujarat, there are certain villages where vaccination rates had dropped. In Kerala also it had dropped. And there's this IAS officer who created an awareness program and pushed it out through schools. That is, uh, the students are trained, and the parents,
and they are influencing their parents.
The students and parents both are trained, and it definitely saw that the vaccination rate went back up. Went up. So
nice.
So that is where we are not. See, there's never going to be a complete solution to this issue, but I think the better question to ask is, how do we alleviate this problem? Instead of finding like 100% solution, there are going to be multiple steps till the point we are able to even start dealing with this issue. So we should rather look at these mini steps than sort of try and look at this as a holistic solution. We should sort of break it down into multiple steps.
Thank you. Charu, do you think that some kind of training awareness, they do these gender sensitivity trainings for various arms of the government now? For example, bus drivers in many cities, public bus drivers in many cities get gender sensitivity training so that they know what to do, if there are certain incidents of molestation or harassment on the bus. Male police personnel get gender sensitivity training. In a sense, it's kind of odd that women don't need gender sensitivity training to know how to deal with men, and men seem to need gender sensitivity training to know how to just handle the other 50% of society. But do you think men involved in politics across political parties need some degree of gender sensitivity training for how they portray women outside? Be it on social media, be it on regular media, right? It seems like letting untrained male politicians loose, you get all kinds of comments. If you look at in 2019, there were comments about female politicians from everything from her hair color to her clothes to, there was a comment about cocky underwear, if you recall, with one of the women. So there is really shocking behavior, and that patriarchal behavior is
I'm trying one last thing that I'm using my hotspot. Just give me one
by some women as well. It is not that it is a male only thing. But the point is gender sensitivity training needed for male politicians so that they know in public, in media, what to say about women. What they do in their private lives is nothing we can do about it.
Tara, I feel a different mindset when you're in public and a different mindset when you are living your personal life will not work, because it's always going to become apparent sometime or the other. A person's real thought will always be visible when he's upset or perturbed or excited or angry. And this differentiation between your public behavior and your personal behavior needs to be done away with. And maybe it's going to require a generational shift. It might not happen right now in our times while we are politicians, but it requires a generational shift. And for that, and I always emphasize on this a lot, there has to be sensitization at the school level itself. There has to be education at the school level itself which teaches men to respect women. And you cannot do this any other way. There's no other way of doing it, because there have been instances, like I'll use a recent example that happened about the boys locker room fiasco. So there was a chat
Yeah,
which
on
leaked
social
out.
media. Yeah, on Instagram.
Absolutely. But before it leaked
Yeah,
out, how many people actually thought to check what young boys are talking about? How many people thought to check what is
right.
the conversation that goes on in classrooms, in the minds of these teenagers? And when we check on that, when we come to realize that, aren't we somewhere at a fault as parents, as the elder generation, when we are not able to correct them? So I think it's going to be a very superficial measure to say, can we have gender sensitization classes in the parliament, for example, or in the assembly? It's not going to work, because people are always very decent. When, for example, if I were to go to my party office or enter parliament, everybody will be very decent. Everyone will say namaste. Everyone will greet me with a lot of cordiality. But how are they going to react when they are perturbed, when they are angry, when they're anxious? That is important. So, to do away with this distinction, start at the school level.
Neelam, would you like
Yes.
to, talk about the portrayal of women in print and broadcast, and then we can close and open up for any questions, right, Kanchi?
Yes.
Yes, I've just
So
come
yes,
to.
I was talking about the fact that the kind of space women politicians get in the print media is slightly more than the broadcast media. There are two, three reasons for it, specific reasons. First, obviously, there is greater space in the print media. The newspapers has that kind of advantage over broadcast. At the same time, with broadcast, as I said, there are some faces which become more significant in terms of the number of times that they have been viewed by people, and obviously people tend to recognize them much more. But why I feel it is a disadvantage for the women politicians, because the reach of broadcast media is much more. They connect with the masses in terms of even people who can't read and write, they can definitely watch news programs. So that is definitely one disadvantage. At the same time, as I said, this divide is slowly being bridged by digital media. One particular example that I would want to give is while covering the 2019 Lok Sabha
Yeah,
elections, I had visited
yeah.
one of the model villages adopted by then Congress President Rahul Gandhi. And while I was working on that story, I wanted to meet the Pradhan. But all these people, all the local reporters, they told me that you don't need to meet the Pradhan. It is his son who will give you all the information, all the data that you need. So for me, it was very, very, I just couldn't understand why would someone do that. And I insisted that no, she is the Pradhan and I want to speak to her. And when I met her, I realized she is an intelligent woman. She has a mind of her own. And she also talked about the fact that most of the reporters, they usually get the quotes from my son and they just put my name. So my point is that even as media, we have to make that effort to reach out where the news is, where the women politicians are, and at the same time don't approach them only for wanting to know about how they spend their time at home.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Another thing that I wanted to add is that often, as I said earlier, also the only stories that we see during Lok Sabha elections or general elections or assembly elections when we are talking about male
Excellent,
candidates
excellent.
is that we want to show their families. At the same time, when we are interviewing female politicians, we tend to ask, how do you manage to, take care of the house as well as be a politician? But I don't think this is the kind of question that we pose to any male politician.
Block her out. What a
Yes.
pity.
So I feel that there are these inherent stereotypes that we have in our mind, even the media. And as a woman journalist, I feel that we really need to
Excellent
take them
comment.
on heads on. Yes. And the digital media, as I said, it is giving us that opportunity. It is because I wanted to talk to the Pradhan and I wanted to get her video interview. She was all I was also able to show her to the people that here we have a Pradhan who has a voice of her own. And as we all must have seen that new series which talked Panchayat, which talked about the female Pradhan, but it is the husband who was managing the affairs. So that is a reality even today in our villages, in our rural India. And the media really needs to do their part as well. They need to they need to have their role in place at the same time.
Manage, divide your time.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tara, can you hear me? Can everybody on the panel hear me? Can you all hear me? Can you just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? Yeah? Hello? Can you all hear me? Hi, Tara, Prateek.
I can hear you. I can
Oh,
hear you.
Prateek, you can always hear me. Thanks for being being the ear to my voice. Thank you so much. Actually, I have come in to bring this discussion to an end, and I want to now thank Tara for moderating it so well. Um, and I would definitely want to acknowledge while we are ending this discussion that yes, we were having a lot of hurdles and a lot of problems with the internet connection, with the software, with being live today, but I have a big thank you, a resounding thank you to everybody who stuck on with us today, from Yasmin to Charu to Prateek, and from for Neelam especially. Thank you for giving that last blockbuster kind of an ending to this. I am so thankful also because there were a lot of solutions that were spoken about. Charu spoke about how women should be, writing and putting their voices out there. It could be a smaller, section. It could be a small section report, or it could be a small article. Neelam came in and she also pointed and she looked in cell, within the media and said that this is what we need to do. Yasmin has been an incredible voice through and through, not only in her political journey, but also as a filmmaker. She has taken it upon herself through a year of through a journey of 12 years to portray women stories through a filmmaking. Today, Prateek, thank you for bringing so much of insights about things that we don't know about, things that we don't talk about. The way you also said that how social media will have its it is its own demon, right? Like in its shape and form that we see currently, but it is also how we don't teach our women, or how do we don't teach our girls to be tech savvy. We tell our boys to learn the gadgets, and we tell our girls to learn knitting, or in the current day arts. So that importance that we want to focus on training women to use media effectively, to use social media effectively. At NETRI, we are every day trying to bolster women's political participation, especially at the grassroots, with women who have been rendered invisible through this disproportionality of coverage. So again, a big resounding thank you to everybody for being here. We will take a couple of questions, like only two questions from the audience, if we can answer something. Can I get to see some questions that we have received, if at all? And if we are not able to see them, okay. So this person is saying that he reported an abuse to national cybercrime twice, but I noticed action was taken immediately. Okay, this is, I think, not in context with what we are trying to address here. Um, I Okay, we can hear you. Okay. So I think we are not able to take the questions from the social media at this point for whatever reason. And without delaying it further, I would like to bring it to a close. Thank you for all your time. If you just want to say something in the end, you can say bye bye to us. You can say all the best to Netri and She the People TV. But thank you, actually. I'm just very happy that we could see through this. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
But can I say something while